Welcome to a special Deep Tech 315 special in the sense we have one topic with many angles to it. That, of course, is the election impact on what it means for tech investing more broadly. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon, and the NASDAQ over the past week has been up about 6% at this time. That compares to a metric I don't reference very often, which is the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is up 4%. So we've seen a little bit of outperformance in tech, but the market has been very strong. Let's talk just a kind of some framework about what we'll go through. Talk about just the broader market. We'll talk about kind of the impact on tech, and then go through some specific companies. And so, just big picture, what do you attribute the move in the market post-election?
As simple as it sounds, I think it was just that there was a lot of money on the sidelines waiting to see what would happen. I think there's a case that could be made where even if the election result was different than what we got, that you still would have seen a pretty good rally in stocks just because it seemed like people were kind of waiting to see what happened. I mean, obviously, if you look at the betting markets, which have been a big part of this presidential election cycle. I think that's one of the stories, by the way, of investments, right? Poly market and some of these other markets that predicted a Trump victory pretty resoundingly.
But on the poly
You know,
market, the poly market piece is there was just a handful of people that were really driving what was going on with that. I agree with you. More broadly is the concept of
I don't think
betting on
I don't
elections,
know
but
that I would agree with that. There were a few whales, obviously, that went in and bet, and some of the liquidity, obviously, I think challenged. And you saw some of the deltas change in what the odds were. But pretty consistently, you look back over the last month, 2 months, the odds that Trump was going to win the election were higher on Polymarket, on Robinhood has an election market now. So, you know, you kind of saw it across the board.
yeah, definitely the concept of forget about the polls, look at the betting odds. That got a big
Yep.
boost forward. The Wall Street Journal did a great piece on it. Look back over the past 100 years on betting on elections, and historically they get it right. The betting odds did not get it right in 2016, but historically they did. And agree with you that that was kind of a fun angle to all of this. And anything further, I want to give you my take on the market rally, but anything more you wanted to add on the market rally post election?
No, only that like I think that people always ask to explain why is something happening in the market in 1 or 2 days, and the reality is anything can make the market go crazy in 1 or 2 days. And I think the question is really more about what does the world look like going forward. I would set aside that whole idea for a second. You know, what could Trump mean? And say that just going back to the betting market thing, I do have a hypothesis just about something social that could happen here, which is you look at this fervor around betting on the election outcome. It's a little bit echoey of some of the stuff we used to see in crypto in 2021.
Mhm.
People going, looking for fun things to bet and do differently, right? And then
Meme
that kind
stocks.
of trickled it, right? Exactly. It trickled its way into the stock market and you got the meme stock phenomena. I almost wonder to some extent, I don't think this is the explanation for the rally, to be clear, but I do wonder if you look forward 3, 6, 9, 12 months, could we get a little bit of a resurgence in the concept of maybe meme stocks on the heels of this betting in the election?
I could see that. It feels like the market's probably healed from what happened in 2022, 23, and kind of get into a better place for that. Big picture is I agree with you on why the market's been moving up. I think it could have gone both directions. I think that the dynamic that this has been, we'll call it, there hasn't been any uh, like angst on either side, no civil unrest. I think that probably has helped the markets. And remember, of course, investors like clarity, love clarity. And so I think that has played a big impact on it. But let's move now towards policies. Of course, not all tech is created equal. When we get the question, what does this mean for tech? It's like, what does it mean for big tech? What does it mean for hardware? What does it mean for software? Little tech, emerging tech, and kind of at the most the broadest stroke here, I think is first that there is going to be less focus on regulation. And I don't know if Trump ever said that there was going to be less focus on regulation, but in general, he's for a smaller government, therefore less regulation. But did he ever, when he was campaigning, did you ever pick up on anything that he just said, I believe in less regulation?
I think that as a general ethos, yes, but I would say as it pertains specifically to tech, it basically couldn't get any worse. Put it that way. Like
Right. Okay.
either option one was if Harris were elected, then you have the same general regime, and regulation has been really hard. With
Right.
Trump, you have the prospect of maybe it gets a little better. I do think,
That's
though,
fair.
with big tech, he has not been a fan of big tech, and
He has
so I
he
don't know that it's
started
a
a lot of
foregone
this too. This
conclusion.
was, yeah, this the kind of the movement against Instagram um, and his, I think, frustration with big tech. I think that really began with him too. So, like as a tech investor who's thinking the climate should be more favorable, like you said, can't get any worse. But um, he did kind of get things going, correct?
What do you mean by get things
Get
going?
things going. He was critical and wanted regulation,
Right.
wanted some breakup of big tech when he was in office. So it. I mean, his view has generally been more negative towards big tech, with the exception of probably Apple and now Tesla. I think he's been generally negative. He hasn't been a fan of Meta or Google.
Yeah, I think it's been imbalanced in some senses because also I believe he and his group have thought
Right.
about just the reality though that we are competing with China specifically, particularly in the AI game, and weakening our best companies might also not be the best idea. And so I don't know. I think that again, I go back to just the simple logic of it. It couldn't get any worse from the prior regime because that was about as tight as it was going to get. Could it stay that tight? Maybe. Could it get looser? Maybe. You know, those are kind of the things that we'll see over the next 6 and 12 months. But certainly, like I think that there is at least some appreciation for the greatness of American companies in the new regime that
Yes,
maybe
that's a
was
good
not the same in the prior.
good point, especially related to AI and the importance of that. I think AI is going to get a better boost because that national security piece, and I think he'll recognize that more. And so would agree on that. So that's kind of at the highest level. I want to talk about some specific companies. I mentioned a couple there, but let's hold that for the end. Uh, other just in terms of like the the side of like the manufacturing of chips. We think he's talking about moving the tax rate from corporate tax rate from 21 to 15% for anyone who manufactures in the U.S. Just be clear, if you're a service provider, if you happen to be an asset manager that's in the U.S., your tax rate is going to stay the same. But in the case of manufacturers, that's anything from furniture to tech that goes down from 21 to 15. So I guess that would be kind of a plus for tech. That falls in the category of a positive for tech, especially somebody like Tesla.
Tech and I think stocks broadly. I mean, that was one of the things you look back at the market era from 2016 to 2020. And I think that the tax cuts of that era obviously had a easy to calculate impact on the bottom line. Earnings were higher. They went higher. You can actually see when that policy kicked in. I believe it was in 2018. You kind of see this step function up in earnings when you look at the S&P 500 corporate earnings. And so just mathematically, right? I mean, your earnings are
That's
going to
good.
go up if that does get passed.
Yep. Let's jump into the companies, just kind of go rapid fire, and we'll kick it off with Meta. Back in March, Trump mentioned that Facebook was the enemy of the people. Of course, he has been more supportive of TikTok. TikTok, just for this recording, sounds like it's going to get banned in Canada, but the probability that TikTok survives is in the U.S. I would say went up, so that's negative for Meta. What is what's the mechanism that like a Trump administration could kind of, what force could he put? I mean, Meta was the big outlier. That stock was down when everything else was ripping. Like how would it actually play out?
I don't know is the short answer. They haven't really talked about what the policies could be, obviously, right? I mean, there could be different ways that they want Meta to deal with customer data. There could be different sorts of taxes or fines that they might levy depending on what they think
Yeah,
the
I guess.
platform's doing, particularly around the fairness of information distribution. And so, I
Hmm.
think that if you really like, okay, get political and literal with it, I think its problem with Meta and likely with Google too is that there does seem to be some favoritism, right, for certain views on those platforms. At least there had been historically. And even Mark Zuckerberg talked about this. I mean, he said,
Right. It
right,
was a
during
mistake.
COVID that the FBI came, right, and it was a mistake that they kind of did police, overly police speech on the platform. And so I think that's what the core of the grievance comes down to is probably that. And it feels like Meta's already made a change in some sense. Like Zuckerberg has been much more changed in terms of how he's talked about the neutrality of information. And so I don't know. My gut is nothing happens with Meta, but how could it happen, right? Like I think if they're seeing things they don't like in terms of policing information, that might be the thing that's a trigger.
So Deepwater, we do own and multiple funds, including our flagship Titan fund. We own Meta and Google and haven't changed that position after the election because we ultimately believe that the AI piece is much more substantial than any of the window dressing around the edges that Doug and I are talking about right now. So AI is more powerful than that, but I just want to mention we do own those, continue to hold them. Um, let's talk a little bit about Apple. Cook was a genius back in 2019 and navigating tariffs successfully. Apple wasn't tariffed. Seems to be doing this great job of keeping relationships good at China and here at home. And I wonder if, kind of in a bizarre contrarian twist, is that uh, that Trump and kind of his personality and how it plays in with some other world leaders, if there's actually a thawing of the cold relationship between U.S. and China. I understand the whole AI and all of that race, but could we see something where kind of some of this anxiety that Apple has to get out of China and looking at India and other parts of the Pacific Rim to change some of the manufacturing? I mean, maybe that some of that slows a little bit.
I don't know that the diversification away from that will slow, but I could see a world where tensions decrease, which would be a contrarian view.
Right.
I think that obviously the talk about Taiwan had escalated over the past several years. It didn't seem to be as much of a topic when President Trump was in office in his prior administration. And so, again, we have some historical reference to say, well, if we go back to something that looks more like that time, maybe that rhetoric does tone down. But again, we'll see. Time will tell.
Love it. We got just a little bit left here. We're going to hit Tesla quickly. That, of course, surged the day after the election. It added $120 billion in market cap. You wonder whose brand is stronger, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, $120 billion market cap, almost like a meme stock move in Tesla. Donald Trump DJT stock added $350 million. So orders of magnitude more powerful move there. I think part of it was just the meme piece. I think part of it was optimism around potentially better relationships with the government with NHTSA and to promote FSD, potentially lower taxes for the manufacturing piece that we talked about. And you kind of, and probably we're not going to see much in terms of changes to, they'll probably go away in terms of the EV tax credits. So you've seen some of the other EV makers down on the election, but in general, being closest to the most powerful person in the world is a good thing for Tesla.
I think it's as simple as that. Yeah, it was certainly not a net negative for Elon that President Trump won. So,
Yeah, he said he was all in. He was right. He's got a history of doing that. We got a history of doing these casts and having a lot of fun. We'll be back next week on behalf of Deep Tech. Bye for now.